A trembling heart flees into the night, believing freedom is the only shield against heartbreak. Yet even freedom comes at a price, especially when it is woven with a secret that cries softly in her arms. Now, the past she fought so desperately to escape rides after her, with urgent pleas and unanswered promises. A man bound by duty, a woman bound by fear, and a truth that could shatter or save them both. Whispers rise, dangers shift in the shadows, and one impossible choice stands between destiny and disaster. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from today? And what do you love most about historical romances? In the misty dawn of a Cotswolds village, where honey-coloured stone cottages huddled against rolling green hills, Eleanor Hawthorne clutched her shawl tighter against the chill. Her heart pounded like a war drum as she glanced back at the grand estate fading into the fog. Blackwood Manor, home to the Marquess who had claimed her soul but shattered her trust. She was 22, her dark curls escaping a simple bonnet, her gown a modest muslin that whispered of better days. Freedom tasted bitter on her tongue, but it was hers now, or so she told herself. Eleanor had fled 3 months ago under cover of night, her belly swelling with the secret that could ruin them both. The Marquess, Arthur Langley, Duke of Ashford, no, Marquess, she corrected herself fiercely, had promised marriage, whispered vows in the moonlit gardens during that fateful house party. But his family's whispers of scandal, his mother's cold decree that a village girl like her was unfit, had turned paradise to poison. When she confessed her condition, his eyes had darkened with duty, not joy. "We must be careful," he'd said, his voice laced with the weight of title and expectation. Careful meant delay, meant hiding her away like a shameful footnote. She couldn't bear it. Not the pitying glances from the servants, nor the isolation in some distant cottage his solicitor had arranged. So she ran to this quiet hamlet of Willowbrook, where ancient oaks guarded secrets and the river murmured lullabies. Here she birthed little Theo in a midwife's care, his cries a melody of defiance. The boy was her anchor now, swaddled in her arms as she trudged toward the village inn, seeking work as a seamstress. Her hands, once soft from idle afternoons, now bore the calluses of survival. The innkeeper, Mrs. Grady, a stout woman with flour-dusted apron and kind eyes, had taken her in. "No questions asked, lass," she'd said, eyeing Eleanor's weary form. "But mind the gossips." "Strangers stir the pot in Willowbrook," Eleanor nodded, forcing a smile. Gossips were the least of her fears. It was the shadows that haunted her, the fear that Arthur's men would find her, drag her back to a life of gilded chains. Days blurred into weeks. Eleanor stitched hems by candlelight, her needle flying through bombazine and linen, while Theo cooed in a cradle carved from local yew. The village unfolded like a faded tapestry, the blacksmith's hammer ringing at dawn, children chasing geese across the common, the squire's wife presiding over tea like a queen. Eleanor kept to the edges, her laughter rare, her eyes always scanning the horizon. Freedom was a fragile bloom in this soil. One evening, as golden light slanted through the inn's mullioned windows, a rider arrived. Not just any rider, a gentleman on a sleek bay, his cloak bearing the insignia of a noble house. Eleanor's breath caught as he dismounted, his boots polished to a gleam against the mud. Tall, broad-shouldered, with raven hair tousled by the wind and eyes like storm-tossed seas. Arthur, he scanned the yard, his jaw set in that familiar line of determination. She ducked behind the curtains, heart slamming against her ribs. How had he found her? A whisper from a servant, a trail of her spending. Theo fussed in his basket, oblivious. "Hush, my love," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his downy head. But the door creaked open, and Mrs. Grady's voice carried, "Good sir, what brings a fine lord like you to our humble door?" "Information," Arthur replied, his tone clipped, aristocratic. I'm seeking a young woman. Dark hair, green eyes, Eleanor Hawthorne. Have you seen her? Eleanor's world tilted. She slipped upstairs, gathering her few belongings with trembling hands. Run again? Hide forever? The choice clawed at her. Below, his voice softened, urgent. Please. It's a matter of the heart. And honor. Honor. The word burned. She scooped up Theo, slipping out the back way into the twilight. The hills called, promising shelter in their folds, but as she crested the rise, a hand caught her arm. Not Arthur, his groom, breathless. Miss, his lordship begs an audience. For the child's sake. The child. Theo's existence, hidden to protect him from a world that would brand him bastard. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Freedom or family? The Marquess was closing in, and with him, the storm she thought she'd escaped. Yet in that moment, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire, a spark ignited within her. She wouldn't cower. Not anymore. Turning back toward the inn, she straightened her spine. Let him beg. Let him see what he'd lost. But the path ahead twisted like the river below, full of shadows and unspoken promises. Word count, 872. Eleanor paused at the edge of the inn's garden, the scent of damp earth and late-blooming lavender filling her lungs. Theo stirred against her chest, bundled in a woolen shawl that smelled of lye soap and home. The groom's words echoed in her mind. For the child's sake, a plea that twisted like a thorn. She couldn't run forever, not with a babe in arms. Squaring her shoulders, she turned back toward the lamplight spilling from the inn's windows. Mrs. Grady met her at the door, wiping floury hands on her apron. The woman's round face creased with concern, her greying bun escaping wisps like smoke. Lass, he's in the parlour. Persistent sort, that one, says it's urgent. Eleanor nodded, her pulse a wild flutter. The inn's common room bustled with evening patrons, farmers nursing ales, a pair of merchants debating wool prices. But the parlour lay tucked away, a private nook for travellers of means. She entered slowly, the floorboards creaking under her half-boots. Arthur stood by the hearth, his back to her, staring into the flames. The firelight danced across his tailored coat of deep blue superfine, the silver buttons catching glints like stars. At 30, he carried the weight of his title with effortless grace. Tall frame, sharp jaw shadowed by a day's stubble, hands clasped behind him as if holding back a storm. He turned at the sound of her step, his grey eyes widening. Eleanor. The word hung heavy, laced with relief, and something sharper. Regret. She set Theo's basket down gently on a side table, keeping one hand on its edge. The baby gurgled softly, oblivious to the tension coiling in the air. "My lord," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Curtsy felt wrong now, too subservient for the fire she'd kindled in her flight. Instead, she met his gaze levelly, her green eyes fierce beneath dark lashes. He stepped closer, but halted when she stiffened. "I've searched everywhere, from the estate to the coaching inns along the turnpike. Why did you leave like that, without a word?" His tone softened, the aristocratic clip giving way to raw urgency. The parlour's walls, papered in faded florals, seemed to close in, the tick of a mantel clock marking each heartbeat. Eleanor's throat tightened. She glanced at Theo, his tiny fists waving like flags of innocence. "You know why. Your mother's letters arrived before I could even pack. Unfit, she called me, a village seamstress daring to ensnare a Marquess. And you spoke of caution, of arrangements. I won't be hidden away like some inconvenient debt." Arthur's face paled, the fire's warmth doing little to chase the chill between them. He raked a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. "My family. They meddle, yes. But I meant to protect you. The scandal would destroy us both. Father is ill, the estate burdened with debts from the wars. A hasty marriage without their blessing." "Debts?" Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising just enough to draw a curious glance from the common room. She lowered it, mindful of Willowbrook's thin walls. "Is that all I am to you? A debt to be managed?" Pain flickered in his eyes, and for a moment she saw the man who'd courted her in Blackwood's rose gardens, laughing over shared secrets, his touch light as a promise. He knelt then, eye level with the basket, his expression softening as Theo cooed again. "No, never that. When you vanished, I thought I'd lost everything." His voice cracked, a rare vulnerability cracking his noble facade. "And now, this, our son." He reached out, hesitating until she nodded. His finger brushed Theo's cheek, wonder lighting his features. "He's perfect, like his mother." Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes, but she blinked them back. This was the Arthur she'd loved, tender, unguarded. Yet trust was a fragile thread, easily snapped. "What do you want, then? To take him? To drag us back to that manor where your mother waits with her venom?" "Never take him," Arthur said firmly, rising but keeping distance. "I want us, a proper life. But we must tread carefully. The village here, it's no place for you both. Let me arrange a cottage nearer the estate with my man to provide, discreetly." She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the beams. "Discreetly. Always that word. I'm tired of shadows, Arthur. Here in Willowbrook I stitch for my keep. Mrs. Grady watches over us like kin. The air is free of your family's whispers." The door swung open then, Mrs. Grady, bustling in with a tray of tea and scones, her cheeks flushed. "Thought you might need fortifying. Milk for the little one?" She set it down, eyeing Arthur with shrewd appraisal. In the Cotswolds, innkeepers knew more than they let on. Gossip flowed like the local cider. "Mind the hour, sir. Roads turn treacherous after dark." Arthur inclined his head graciously. "My thanks, madam. I'll not impose longer." He turned back to Eleanor, his hand brushing hers as he passed a small pouch, coins, heavy with promise. "Think on it. I'll return tomorrow. For you. For Theo." She watched him go, the groom trailing behind into the night. The parlour felt emptier, the fire dying to embers. Theo fussed and she lifted him, inhaling his milky scent. Freedom had been her armour, but Arthur's plea chipped at it. Could she rebuild with him, or was this just another gilded trap? As she rocked the babe, a knock sounded at the inn's back door. Mrs. Grady called out, her voice laced with unease. "Who goes there?" A shadow shifted outside, not Arthur's man, but a cloaked figure slipping a note through the latch before vanishing into the mist. Eleanor's heart sank as she retrieved it, the paper crisp, sealed with unfamiliar wax. The words inside, scrawled in elegant script. "The Marquess's secrets run deep. Beware the Dowager's reach. A friend." The first whisper of deeper intrigue slithered in, coiling around her fragile peace. What shadows had Arthur truly hidden? Eleanor stared at the note in her trembling hand, the ink bleeding slightly where her thumb pressed too hard. The parlour's embers cast flickering shadows, turning the elegant script into a serpent's hiss. "Beware the Dowager's reach." Her mind raced back to Blackwood Manor, where the Dowager Marchioness, Lady Beatrice Langley, had ruled like a queen in exile. Her powdered face a mask of disdain, her words sharp as sewing needles. Had she sent this? Or was it truly a friend, lurking in the wings of Arthur's shadowed world? She crumpled the paper, tucking it into her bodice beside the locket she'd worn since their first stolen kiss. A simple gold oval, etched with intertwined initials, now a weight against her heart. Theo whimpered, sensing her unrest, and she hushed him with a lullaby fragment, her voice a fragile thread in the quiet inn. Mrs. Grady poked her head in, brows furrowed like ploughed fields. "Everything all right, dear? That lord stirred up the evening more than a fox in the hen-house." Just old ghosts, Eleanor murmured, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The innkeeper lingered, her calloused hands twisting her apron. In Willowbrook, secrets were currency. Traded over tea and tattles. If you need aught, a strong door or an ear, I'm here. But mind, the roads whisper back to the great houses. Nobles don't forget. Eleanor nodded, gratitude warming her despite the chill. Mrs. Grady had become an unlikely ally, her broad-shouldered kindness a bulwark against the world's indifference. As the woman bustled away, Eleanor lifted Theo and climbed the narrow stairs to her cramped room under the eaves. The thatched roof sloped low, rain pattering like impatient fingers. She laid the babe in his cradle, then paced the worn floorboards, the note burning against her skin. Sleep evaded her that night. Dawn broke grey and sodden, the Cotswolds hills shrouded in mist like a veil over secrets. Arthur returned as promised, his horse's hooves churning the mud outside the inn. This time, he wasn't alone. A carriage followed, its black lacquer gleaming ominously, emblazoned with the Langley crest, a silver stag rampant. Eleanor's stomach knotted as she watched from the window, Theo nursing at her breast. What new trap was this? Mrs. Grady ushered him up, her voice carrying caution. "The parlour again, sir. And mind the little one, she's not one for surprises." Arthur entered alone, his face drawn, eyes shadowed, as if he'd ridden through hell itself. He carried a leather case, its clasp worn from use. "Eleanor," he began, voice low and earnest, "I've come with terms, real ones, no more delays." She stood by the table, arms crossed over Theo's sleeping form in the crook of her elbow. The room smelled of fresh bread from below, a stark contrast to the tension thickening the air. "Terms? Like a contract for horses or land? I'm no chattel, Arthur." His jaw tightened, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he opened the case, revealing documents, parchments yellowed with age, sealed with red wax. "Marriage settlements. Drafted by my solicitor in secret. You'll have a dower house on the estate, independent of my mother. Funds for Theo's future, education, everything, and us. Wed by special license, away from prying eyes." Eleanor's breath hitched. Marriage. The word she dreamed of in moonlit gardens, now presented like a ledger entry. She scanned the papers, her seamstress's eyes picking out the fine print. Provisions for her widowhood, clauses binding the estate's whispers. But one line leaped out, a veiled reference to familial objections, with powers granted to the dowager to intervene if scandal ensued. "Your mother," she said flatly, handing back the top sheet. "She's woven into this like a thorn in the hem. What if she contests it? Drags my name through the courts, brands Theo illegitimate before he's even christened." Arthur's eyes darkened, storm clouds gathering. "She won't. I've confronted her. Father's death last month, God rest him, left me as Marquess in truth. The title's mine, the decisions too, but the debts, they're crushing. French wars stripped the lands bare, tenants starving, rents unpaid. Marrying you openly now could spark rumors, investors fleeing. We do this quietly for Theo's sake." The social cost hit her like a slap, whispers in assembly rooms, doors closing to her forever in polite society. Refusal meant scraping by in Willowbrook, her son's future tethered to her needle. Acceptance chained her to a world of protocol, where every glance was judged, every step measured by etiquette's rigid ruler. "And if I say no," she challenged, voice steady despite the quake inside, "you take him anyway? Claim paternal rights?" He recoiled as if struck. "Never. But the world won't wait. My cousin Edmund, he eyes the title like a hawk. If he learns of Theo, he'll use it as leverage, paint me unfit. The dowager aids him. Her letter's full of poison since you left." A knock interrupted, sharp, insistent. Mrs. Grady's voice filtered up. "Miss Hawthorne, a visitor at the back, says it's family business." Eleanor's pulse surged. She glanced at Arthur, who frowned. hand going to his coat pocket where a pistol might hide, but it was no armed man. Instead, a wiry fellow in threadbare livery slipped in, bowing low. "From Lady Langley, ma'am. Urgent missive." The envelope was heavy, perfumed with lavender, her scent. Eleanor broke the seal with numb fingers. Inside, a single page. "Return the child at once, or face the consequences. Your indiscretion ends here. The family will not tolerate a bastard's claim. B.L." The room spun. Arthur snatched it, his face paling to ash. "That viper, she's gone too far." But the damage rooted deep. The first concrete obstacle, a veto from the grave of their old life. Allies emerged in fragments, Mrs. Grady's loyalty downstairs, perhaps this anonymous note's author. Antagonists sharpened, the dowager's reach, Edmund's shadow. Eleanor's hesitation cracked. Social ruin loomed either way, exile in the village or scrutiny in the manor. Theo stirred, his cry a call to decision. "Pack my things," she said finally, voice resolute. "But on my terms, no carriage. We ride to a neutral ground, a posting inn on the Gloucester road. There, we wed, or not at all." Arthur's relief was palpable, mingled with awe. "Agreed." But as they prepared, the note's warning echoed. The new world unfolded. Alliances forged in haste, vigilance against family knives, debts binding like chains. Her status teetered, mother, bride-to-be, or fugitive once more. Yet, as they stepped into the drizzling afternoon, a rider approached from the hills. Edmund Langley himself, his horse lathered, eyes narrowing on the scene. "Cousin," he called, voice oily with feigned surprise, "what intrigue brews here?" The rupture was complete. The storm, breaking wide. The drizzle thickened into a steady Cotswolds downpour as Edmund Langley reined in his horse, water sluicing off his oiled greatcoat. His face, sharp-featured and perpetually smirking, fixed on Eleanor with the cold appraisal of a man sizing up an auction lot. At 28, he was Arthur's shadow, slimmer, paler, with eyes like chipped flint. "Cousin," he repeated, dismounting with deliberate slowness, his boots sinking into the mud. "A family outing in this weather, and with company." His gaze slid to Eleanor, lingering on Theo, bundled against her, then flicked to the packed satchels by the inn door. Arthur stepped forward, positioning himself between them, his stance unyielding as an ancient oak. "Edmund, what brings you to Willowbrook? Surely not the scenery." The words carried a warning, laced with the authority of his new title. The air hummed with unspoken rivalries, the estate's debts hung over them both like a noose, and Edmund's ambitions were no secret among the tenants. Eleanor clutched Theo closer, her heart a frantic bird against her ribs. The groom hovered nearby, hand on his pistol, while Mrs. Grady watched from the inn's threshold, arms crossed like a sentinel. Edmund's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Word travels, Arthur. Mother's been concerned. A certain disappearance, whispers of a child. I thought to offer aid." He bowed mockingly to Eleanor. "Miss Hawthorne, is it? Charmed. The village speaks of your talents with a needle, though I wonder, seamstress or something more." The insult landed like a slap, subtle yet stinging, the class friction crackling in the wet air. Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin, meeting his stare. "More than enough for my needs, sir. Unlike some, I earn my keep without scheming for another's birthright." The words escaped before she could rein them, bold in her fragile new world. Edmund's laugh was a bark, short and mirthless. "Feisty. Mother will adore that." He turned to Arthur, voice dropping. "The Dowager summons you both to Blackwood by week's end. Family council. Debts won't settle themselves, and neither will. Irregularities." With the tip of his hat, he remounted and spurred away, leaving splatters of mud in his wake. Arthur exhaled sharply, tension easing from his shoulders only fractionally. That snake, he's been Mother's eyes all along. He glanced at Eleanor, his grey eyes softening in a micro-gesture of solidarity, a brief touch to her elbow, warm through her damp sleeve, gone in an instant, but lingering like a promise. We'll wed at the inn on the Gloucester Road, as you said, neutral ground. My man will ride ahead to arrange it. She nodded, the small advance warming her despite the chill. For the first time since fleeing, she felt seen, not as a burden, but as a partner in this tangled dance. Yet Edmund's arrival marked the integration's first test. Whispers would spread from Willowbrook to the manor's halls, measuring her acceptance in sidelong glances and hushed tones. 2 days later, they arrived at the Posting Horn Inn, a bustling crossroads stop where coaches rattled in from Oxford and Bath. The place thrummed with semi-public life, travellers in the taproom swapping tales of Napoleon's shadow, servants scurrying with trays of ale and stew. Arthur had secured a private parlour overlooking the stable yard, its walls hung with hunting prints and a fire crackling against the autumn bite. Eleanor, in her best gown, a soft wool of sage green, high-waisted and trimmed with modest lace, felt the weight of eyes as they entered. Theo slept in a borrowed cradle, his breaths even. The ceremony was simple, officiated by a local vicar Arthur's groom had fetched, special license in hand to bypass the banns. No flowers, no musicians, just vows exchanged over a scarred oak table, the parchments from the leather case spread like a map to their future. I, Arthur Langley, take thee, Eleanor Hawthorne. His voice steady. But when he slipped the plain gold band on her finger, unadorned, free of the dowager's jewels, it caught the light, starting an emotional arc. The ring, cool at first, warmed against her skin, a symbol of choice over chains. I do, she whispered, her green eyes locking with his in a shared silence that spoke volumes. Regret mended, trust tentatively rebuilt. His hand covered hers briefly, thumb tracing the band, a touch that sent a quiet thrill through her. For a heartbeat the world narrowed to that connection, the first peak of hope in their union. But the test came swiftly. As they emerged into the inn's corridor, a cluster of patrons, merchants in waistcoats, a parson's wife with a lace cap, turned, murmurs rippling like pond stones. The Marquess? Wed to a village girl? One whispered, loud enough to carry. The parson's wife sniffed, her gaze raking Eleanor's attire. Bold indeed, though charity covers many sins. Humiliation bloomed subtle, a friction of class that pricked like nettles, rejection in arched brows, acceptance withheld behind fans and sidelong stares. Arthur's defence was minimal, a firm arm at Eleanor's waist as he guided her past. Mind your tongues, he said coolly to the group, his tone brooking no argument. My wife commands respect. The word wife hung triumphant. Their first shared success, small but real. Yet as they settled in a corner booth for a modest wedding breakfast of cold meats and cider, a shadow stirred. From the taproom's edge, a cloaked figure watched, Edmund's man, no doubt, noting every detail for the dowager's report. The antagonist's reach extended, observing from the gloom. Eleanor sipped her cider, the ring glinting as she broke bread with Arthur. Their conversation turned light, a touch of humor in his recount of a childhood mishap with a pony. She laughed softly, the sound easing the knot in her chest. But the micro-gestures built. His foot brushing hers under the table, accidental yet intentional, a silent vow amid the crowd's scrutiny. As evening fell, a boy delivered the local gazette. Fresh from the press, Arthur unfolded it by lamplight, his face tightening. There in the society column, whispers from the Posting Horn, the Marquess of Ashford weds in haste to a Cotswold seamstress. Family approval pending? The visible consequence landed, a printed barb, fueling the dowager's ire, setting the board for greater battles. Eleanor met his gaze across the table, resolve hardening. Let them whisper. We're bound now. But outside, hooves thundered, riders approaching through the dusk, cloaks whipping in the wind. Allies or foes? The parlour door rattled, and Mrs. Grady's distant voice, no, a stranger's, called Arthur's name. The threat loomed clearer, their fragile peace teetering on the edge of revelation. The door to the parlour burst open with a gust of damp wind, slamming against the wall like a thunderclap. Eleanor jumped, her hand flying to Theo's cradle where he slept undisturbed. Arthur rose swiftly, his chair scraping the flagstones, one hand instinctively reaching for the poker by the hearth. The riders outside were no mere travellers. Their cloaks bore the Langley silver stag, mud-splattered but unmistakable. Edmund's men, or worse, the Dowager's enforcers. A stocky fellow in livery stepped in first, rain dripping from his tricorn hat. "My lord," he said, bowing low but eyeing Eleanor with sharp curiosity. "Urgent dispatch from Blackwood Manor. The Dowager insists on your immediate return. Family matters press." He thrust a sealed letter forward. The wax cracked like a broken promise. Arthur snatched it, breaking the seal without a word. His face hardened as he scanned the lines, the firelight etching deep shadows across his brow. Eleanor's pulse thrummed. "What does it say?" She kept her voice low, mindful of the inn's thin walls where ears pressed close. He folded the paper tightly, tucking it into his waistcoat. "Nothing we can't handle, but the roads flood tonight. A storm's brewing from the west. We'll ride at first light." The messenger lingered, then retreated with a nod, his boots echoing down the corridor. Arthur turned to her, his grey eyes stormy. "My mother's spies. Edmund's too, no doubt. We can't stay here, the inn's too exposed." The rain hammered the windows now, turning the stable yard into a churning mire. Travellers huddled in the taproom below, their laughter muffled by the gale. Eleanor glanced at Theo, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Where then? Back to Willowbrook? No. Arthur paced, his polished boots silent on the worn rug. There's an old hunting lodge on the estate's edge, miles from the manor. Forgotten since father's time, we'll hole up there till the waters recede. Safe, private. He met her gaze, a flicker of apology in it. It's no palace, but it'll give us time to talk. Truly. She nodded, the decision settling like a weight. Confinement by storm, it forced their hand, binding them in this fragile new marriage before shadows could swallow it whole. They gathered their things swiftly, the satchels, Theo bundled against her chest in a sling of soft flannel. Arthur paid the innkeeper double, his voice clipped with noblesse oblige. Discretion, if you please. The man grunted assent, pocketing the coins. The ride was a blur of lashing rain and thunderous skies. Arthur led on his bay, Eleanor behind on a sturdy mare from the inn stable, Theo mercifully drowsy against the motion. Lightning forked across the hills, illuminating ancient stone walls, snaking through the gloom. The Cotswolds unfolded wild and unforgiving. No cosy cottages now, just sodden fields and roaring streams swollen by the deluge. They reached the lodge as full dark fell, a squat timber building half swallowed by ivy. Its chimney belching smoke from a fire the gamekeeper had lit on Arthur's earlier note. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp wool. A single room served all, a wide hearth blazing, a trestle table scarred from hunts long past, 2 truckle beds pushed together under a threadbare canopy. The gamekeeper, old Tom, with his rheumy eyes and gnarled hands, had left bread, cheese, and a jug of ale before vanishing into the night. "Storm'll pass by morn, my lord," he'd muttered, then gone. Eleanor unwrapped Theo, laying him on a blanket by the fire. The babe stirred, cooing as warmth seeped in. She busied herself with the food, slicing the loaf with a hunting knife, her hands steadier than her heart. Arthur shrugged off his soaked greatcoat, hanging it by the flames. Water pooled at his feet, but he moved with purpose, adding logs to the blaze. Silence stretched, broken only by the rain's relentless drum and the crackle of sap. Finally he spoke, voice rough from the cold. This place. It was Father's refuge, after Mother turned cold. He sat across from her, elbows on the table, staring into the fire. He'd bring me here as a boy, teach me to track deer. No titles, no expectations, just us. A pause hung heavy. Then he continued softer. But the wars changed him. Waterloo's ghosts, debts piled like snowdrifts. He died believing he'd failed the line. Eleanor's knife paused mid-slice. She saw him then, not the Marquess, but the man scarred by duty's blade. "You're Luto," she said gently, the words slipping out in her village lilt. Grief. I felt it too after my father passed. A fever took him in 1812, left Mother and me to the workhouse's shadow. She set the bread down, her green eyes meeting his. That's why I stitched. Why Blackwood's gardens felt like a dream. Escape from scraping by. Arthur's hand reached across, stopping short of hers, a gesture of restraint, yet intimate in its nearness. I should have seen it. Your strength. Instead, I hid behind caution, fearing Mother's wrath. She's broken too. Father's neglect hardened her. Now she clings to the name like armor, striking at anything that threatens it. Regret etched his face, humanizing the noble she'd fled. Theo deserves better. We do. The fire popped, sending sparks dancing. Eleanor pulled a small object from her pocket. The locket. Its gold warmed by her bodice. She opened it, revealing a miniature portrait. Her parents painted in faded oils before hardship claimed them. This was Mother's. She read to me from it. Tales of knights and ladies. True love conquering all. Her voice trembled, layers peeling back. I believed it with you, until the whispers. He leaned closer, studying the tiny faces. May I? At her nod, he took it gently, his thumb tracing the edge. A seen anchor, this heirloom, drawing out confessions like thread from a spool. My own wound. A promise to Father on his deathbed. Secure the estate. Marry for alliance. But you, Eleanor, you woke something dormant. Guilt twisted it into delay. I beg forgiveness. Tears welled, but she blinked them away. Trust bloomed tentative, warmed by the hearth's glow. No consummation, just this shared vulnerability, a tacit promise in his steady gaze. Forgiven, she whispered, if we face it together. No more hiding. He returned the locket, his fingers brushing hers, electric, changing the air's temperature from wary chill to fragile hope. They ate then, simple fare, turning to feast in the quiet intimacy. Theo woke, gurgling, and Arthur lifted him awkwardly, cradling the boy with a father's awe. Laughter bubbled, light, a touch of humor, as the babe tugged his cravat. Future Marquess, already commanding, Arthur quipped, and Eleanor smiled, the first real one in months. But the storm outside mirrored the one brewing within their world. As midnight neared, a knock rattled the door. Faint, insistent. Arthur tensed, setting Theo down. He cracked it open, wind howling through. No one, just a sodden packet on the step, sealed with the dowager's lavender wax. He snatched it inside, ripping it open by firelight. Eleanor's stomach dropped. What is it? His face drained of color. A warning. From Edmund on Mother's behalf. The marriage is invalid without council approval. Return the child or lose everything. They're coming at dawn, with men and warrants. The emotional tide crashed low, trust's fragile bridge trembling under the antagonist's signal. Allies scarce, the lodge no sanctuary now. Escape? Confrontation? The night deepened, rain weeping as their peace fractured once more. The rain lashed the lodge's shutters like accusatory fingers, the wind howling through cracks in the timber walls. Arthur crumpled the packet in his fist, the paper's edges fraying under his grip. Eleanor's blood turned to ice as she rose from the trestle table, Theo clutched tight against her shoulder. The babe's warmth was her only anchor in the sudden chill that seeped from the hearth's dying flames. "Invalid," she echoed, her voice a whisper sharp as shattered glass. "We've spoken the vows." The vicar witnessed it. What more do they want? Arthur's jaw clenched, shadows carving hollows in his cheeks. He paced the cramped room, boots thudding softly on the packed earth floor. Power, control. Mothers always schemed to keep the title pure. Bloodlines untainted by village stock, as she calls it. He stopped, eyes locking on hers with a desperation that cracked his resolve. Edmund's her puppet now. Father's death handed him the reins on the estate's ledgers. This is blackmail. They claim the special license was forged, that without the family council's seal, it's no marriage at all. Theo's legitimacy hangs by a thread. Eleanor's mind reeled, the locket heavy against her chest like a stone. Legitimacy, the word she'd buried deep in Willowbrook's quiet days, now dragged into the light by family vipers. She shifted Theo, his tiny hand fisting her collar, oblivious to the storm unraveling their fragile union. "And if we ignore it? Ride to London, seek a magistrate?" He shook his head, raking fingers through rain-damp hair. "Too slow. The roads flood worse by morning. Edmund's men are already mobilizing. Solicitors, constables from the county seat. They'll paint you as a fortune hunter, me as duped. The tenants, they'll turn. Debts mean evictions. Whispers of scandal mean no loans from the banks." His voice broke, raw with the weight of inheritance's curse. "I thought the lodge would buy us time. Foolish." The fire sputtered, embers glowing like accusatory eyes. Outside, hooves splashed through puddles, distant but closing. Eleanor's isolation crashed over her, a valley of despair deeper than Willowbrook's mists. No Mrs. Grady's sturdy arms here, no village allies to rally, just this drafty shell, walls closing in with the dowager's invisible reach. Her status plummeted in that instant, from secret bride to potential outcast, her son's future bartered like estate lands. A thunderous knock shattered the tension. Arthur yanked the door open, wind whipping in like an intruder. Two figures loomed. Edmund, drenched and smirking, flanked by a burly bailiff in oilskins, lanterns swinging from his belt. Rain sluiced off Edmund's tricorn, his pale eyes gleaming with triumph. Cousin, and the bride. The word dripped sarcasm, his gaze raking Eleanor like a blade. "Mother sends regrets. The council convenes at dawn. You will attend or face the consequences." Arthur blocked the threshold, his frame a barrier of restrained fury. "This is my home, my wife. Leave, Edmund, before I have you for trespass." Edmund's laugh cut through the gale, bitter and triumphant. "Wife? A hasty farce in a roadside parlour? The vicars fled to Bath, papers misplaced. Mother's solicitor arrives with proofs. Your debts make you vulnerable, Arthur. Sign over Theo's guardianship, dissolve this mockery, and we'll overlook the indiscretion. Refuse." He leaned in, voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "And the courts declare the boy a bastard. The Langley name drags through the mud, investors bolt, and you lose Blackwood piece by piece." The bailiff shifted, his hand resting on a sheaf of documents. Warrants, perhaps, or eviction notices masked as legal niceties. Eleanor's stomach twisted, public wound. The attack was frontal, sabotaging their alliance before it could root. Whispers would fly from this night, to assembly rooms, London clubs, branding her a schemer, Arthur a weakling. Trust fractured like the storm-tossed river outside. She saw doubt flicker in his eyes, the pull of duty warring with love. "Edmund," Arthur growled, fists balling, "you've poisoned enough. Father's will named me heir, not you." "Your father's debts name me savior," Edmund retorted, stepping closer. I've creditors lined up, London bankers eager for Langley collateral, marry as mother decrees, a titled girl with a dowry, and the estate survives. This," he gestured dismissively at Eleanor, "ends in the workhouse." The barb struck deep, evoking Eleanor's buried fears, her parents' fate, the needle's grind. She stepped forward, voice steady despite the quake. "You speak of survival, sir, yet scheme like a thief in the night. Theo is no collateral." Edmund's eyes narrowed, the antagonist ascending in his oily confidence. Bold words from a seamstress. "Enjoy the lodge. It's the last privacy you'll have." He turned, the bailiff following, their lanterns bobbing into the dark, but the damage lingered, a tangible loss. Arthur's support from the estate's stewards would crumble under this threat, allies peeling away like wet bark. The door slammed shut, but the rupture echoed. Arthur sank onto a stool, head in hands. "They're right about the debts. I can't fight them without proof. Father's ledgers hidden in the manor's study. If we go back..." Separation loomed, emotional chasm widening. Eleanor knelt beside him, hand on his arm, cold now, distant. "We vowed before God. That's our truth." But isolation gripped her. Status fallen to fugitive wife in a world of titles and traps. The moment of no return. Ignoring the summons meant exile, pursuit by law. Yielding broke their bond irreparably. Theo wailed, the cry piercing the gloom. Arthur rose, gathering the babe awkwardly, but his eyes avoided hers, duty's shadow pulling him toward the manor alone. "I must go at first light. Face them, you. Stay hidden, for now." The words severed them, an emotional exile born of the night's ultimatum. Rain wept on, the lodge a tomb for their budding peace, as dawn's grey light crept in, promising confrontation's blade. The grey dawn seeped through the lodge's grimy windows, turning the room into a watercolour of shadows and regret. Eleanor watched Arthur strap on his greatcoat, his movements precise but heavy, like a man shouldering an invisible yoke. Theo nursed quietly at her breast, his small warmth a defiant spark against the chill. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the air hung sodden, thick with unspoken fractures. Arthur paused at the door, his grey eyes meeting hers, guilt there, not the cold distance she'd feared in Willowbrook's mists. "I ride for Blackwood now," he said, voice low and rough from the sleepless night. "Face the council. Edmund's bluffing about the warrants, but Mother's influence. It poisons everything. Stay here with Tom the gamekeeper. He'll guard you." He reached out, his hand hovering near Theo's downy head, then dropped it. Duty pulled him like a riptide, reframing his hesitation not as indifference, but as a man's war with legacy's chains. Eleanor rose, shifting the babe to her shoulder. Isolation clawed at her, but anger kindled brighter, a peak of resolve amid the valley's despair. "No, hiding again. That's what drove me from the manor." She stepped closer, her sage-green gown rumpled from the storm's vigil. "We face this as one, or not at all." He searched her face, surprise flickering to admiration. "The roads are treacherous, and you—" "Am your wife," she cut in, chin lifting. Trust stirred, fragile but growing, warmer than the dying fire. His nod was slow, a bridge rebuilt in that shared gaze. They mounted in silence, Arthur lifting her onto the mare with hands steady on her waist, a contained touch, speaking volumes without words. Theo rode secure in a sling against her, the party threading through flooded lanes toward Blackwood's looming spires. The manor emerged from the mist like a brooding sentinel, honeystone walls dripping ivy, towers piercing the low clouds, servants scattered at their approach, whispers rippling like wind through the stables. Edmund waited in the great hall, flanked by the dowager, Lady Beatrice, regal in black bombazine, her powdered wig a crown of frost, fans snapping like a whip. At 58, she embodied faded grandeur, her sharp features twisted in disdain. "Arthur and the intruder," she hissed, eyes narrowing on Eleanor. "This farce ends today." The council assembled in the oak-panelled library, steely-eyed solicitors, tenant stewards, Edmund smirking from a leather armchair. Ledgers sprawled across the table, debts inked in crimson, £20,000 from war loans, harvests failed by endless rains. Arthur stood tall, but Eleanor felt the room's weight crush him. "The marriage stands," he declared, voice echoing off bookshelves heavy with forgotten tomes. "Special license witnessed. Eleanor is Marchioness now." Laughter erupted, Edmund's first, then the Dowager's icy trill. "Marchioness? A seamstress's bastard whelp legitimized by your folly?" She thrust a sheaf of papers forward. "Father's will, clauses you ignored. Guardianship vests in me until debt's clear. Dissolve it, or the bailiff sees Blackwood tomorrow." Eleanor's blood boiled, indignation surging like a cresting wave. The public wound deepened. Allies wavered, stewards shifting uncomfortably. The antagonist's sabotage laid bare in legal barbs. But as Edmund crowed, a glint caught her eye, a loose panel in the mantel ajar since childhood visits. Heart pounding. She excused herself under pretense of Theo's fussing, slipping into the dim study adjoining. Dust motes danced in the slanted light. Father's desk, scarred and locked. She pried the drawer with a letter opener, hands trembling. Inside, a hidden journal, leather-bound, Arthur's father's hand scrawled in faded ink. Pages flipped, confessions of manipulated debts, Edmund's forged signatures on loans, the Dowager's letters urging sabotage to force an alliance marriage. "Beatrice schemes with our nephew," one entry read, "to claim the title through my ruin. Hide this, lest it destroy us all." Proof tumbled out. A portrait miniature of young Edmund with a creditor's mark, testimony from a dead steward pinned inside. Peak of hope ignited, truth structural, unraveling the plot. Eleanor clutched the journal, re-entering the library with fire in her veins. All eyes turned. "Lies end here," she announced, voice clear and commanding, agency blooming public. She slammed the journal down, pages splaying. "Your debts, Lady Beatrice? Forged by Edmund's hand, your will? A forgery to steal the line." Gasps rippled. The Dowager paled, fan dropping. "Insolent wench." "That's truth," Eleanor pressed, opening to the portrait. "See your puppet's mark. Stewards read the entries. Tenants suffer while kin plunder." Proactive strike. She turned to the room, green eyes sweeping faces. "I've stitched for Willowbrook's poor. No hardships bite. Arthur fights for you all. Join us, or let vipers rule." The tide shifted. A steward rose, nodding gravely. "Aye, Miss Marchioness, we've suspected." Murmurs swelled to outrage, indignation peaking against the villains, Edmund's smirk crumbling, the Dowager shrinking as whispers branded her schemer. Arthur's eyes met Eleanor's, reframed in awe. Not guilt's cold shadow, but shared duty's fire. He stepped beside her, hand brushing hers, trust solidifying, a quiet reapproximation amid the chaos. Yet Valley plunged swift. Edmund lunged, snatching the journal. "Burn it!" But Arthur wrested it back, solicitors intervening. "Arrest him!" Arthur commanded, voice steel. Edmund bolted, the Dowager hissing threats. "You'll rue this!" Her response a greater menace, fleeing to rally London allies. The council dispersed in turmoil, but perception altered. Eleanor, from intruder to saviour. Respect dawning in bowed heads. Arthur drew her aside in the corridor, Theo cooing between them. You unveiled it all." His fingers laced hers briefly, passion yielding to profound trust. "Together, we reclaim this." She smiled, hope's peak warming the chill hall, but a footman approached, breathless. "My lord, a summons. The county assembly in Gloucester 3 days hence. All estates convene, Edmund's called it, to challenge your rule publicly." The hook sank deep. Decisive event loomed, baileyards and ballrooms awaiting their stand. Shadows lengthened, but Eleanor's agency burned brighter, the couple's bond forged in Revelation's fire. The carriage rattled over the rutted road to Gloucester, the Cotswolds hills giving way to broader vales, where the Severn gleamed like polished silver under a reluctant sun. Eleanor sat beside Arthur, Theo nestled in her lap, his tiny fingers clutching the edge of her pelisse. 3 days had blurred since the library's revelations, the journal locked away in Arthur's study, guarded by loyal stewards, now whispering of justice over tea. But tension coiled tight as a bowstring. Edmund's summons to the county assembly hung over them like a guillotine, promising the greatest public stage yet. The assembly rooms, where gentry from Kent to Yorkshire converged, judgments swift as a fox's strike. Arthur's hand rested near hers on the seat, a silent anchor. No words passed, but his gaze lingered, warm, resolute, reframing their bond from fractured vows to unyielding partnership. Eleanor felt the shift deep in her bones. No longer the hidden seamstress, she was Marchioness in truth, her agency a flame kindled in Blackwood's shadows. Yet doubt nipped at her heels. What sabotage waited in Gloucester's gilded halls? The assembly rooms sprawled like a neoclassical dream, columns of Bath stone framing arched doors where liveried footmen bowed to arriving coaches. Inside, chandeliers blazed with beeswax candles, casting a golden haze over silk-gowned ladies and waistcoated gentlemen. The air hummed with violin strains and murmured scandals, the scent of orris powder mingling with roast venison from the supper room. This was society's forge, alliances hammered, reputations melted or mended in a single evening. Edmund held court near the dais, his slim frame resplendent in emerald velvet, the dowager at his elbow like a raven in bombazine. Her fan fluttered, concealing a serpent's smile. As Arthur and Eleanor entered, heads turned, whispers rippling like wind through wheat. "The scandalous match," one matron hissed to her companion, "and with a babe, bold or brazen." Humiliation's subtle sting pricked Eleanor, eyes raking her modest gown of ivory muslin, high-waisted and trimmed with simple ribbon, worlds from the dowager's jewelled confections. Arthur's arms stiffened under hers, but he guided her forward with chin high. "Ignore the vipers," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "We stand together." The micro-gesture steadied her, a brush of knuckles, intimate amid the crowd's scrutiny. The master of ceremonies called order, the assembly settling into rows of gilt chairs for the county discourse, a veiled tribunal on estates, debts and lineages where fortunes turned on eloquent barbs. Edmund rose first, voice smooth as oiled leather. "My lords, ladies, the Langley affairs demand address. Debts cripple Blackwood. £20,000, gentlemen, from mismanaged wars and hasty decisions." He paused, eyes locking on Eleanor. "A certain union, rushed without council seal, invites ruin. I present evidence." A liveried servant wheeled in a lacquered case, unfolding it to reveal a dossier, forged ledgers, a witness, a pinched-faced solicitor, bought no doubt, swearing the special license counterfeit. Gasps swelled. "The boy," Edmund intoned, gesturing to Theo in Eleanor's arms, "cannot inherit scandal. Dissolve the farce, or the Langleys fall." The dowager nodded, her voice a silken blade. "For the family's honour, a true alliance awaits, one with dowry to save us all." Cheers erupted from Edmund's allies, merchants eyeing Langley lands, gentry loyal to old blood. The room tilted, Eleanor's world narrowing to the antagonist's triumph. Sabotage landed public, branding her the fortune hunter, Arthur the fool. Faces she'd hoped to win turned cold, stewards from neighbouring estates, once neutral, now murmuring of impropriety. But Eleanor rose, Heart pounding like assembly drums, agency surged, her voice cutting through the din. "Lords and ladies, I stand not as intruder, but as kin unveiled." She signalled the door. In strode old Tom the gamekeeper, roomy eyes fierce, clutching the journal. Propped by Arthur's strategy, a witness key from the manor's depths. "Read," she commanded, opening it to the damning pages. "Forged debts here." Edmund's hand, plotting with Lady Beatrice to seize the title. Tenants starved while they schemed. Murmurs turned to outrage. Tom testified, gravel voice booming. "Seen it myself, sirs. Young Master Edmund signing false notes in the dead of night. Dowager's orders." The solicitor paled, crumbling under cross-questions from a sharp-eyed baronet. Proofs cascaded. The miniature portrait. Steward affidavits smuggled in Eleanor's reticule. Arthur flanked her, adding weight. Father's true ledgers, hidden from these thieves. Blackwood endures, through honest hands. The tide crashed. Edmund sputtered, face flushing crimson. Lies, fabrications by a desperate woman. But the dowager's fan snapped shut, her allies peeling away like frost in sun. A chorus rose. Traitors! Justice for the tenants! The assembly reenquadrada Eleanor, from whispered shame to revered defender, nods of respect rippling through the crowd. Ladies who sneered now pressed forward, offering congratulations. "Brave soul," one whispered. Gentlemen clapped Arthur's shoulder, toasts to the true Marquess echoing. Edmund lunged, snatching at the journal. But constables, summoned by the baronet, seized him. "Arrest for forgery!" The dowager shrieked, collapsing into a chair as her web unravelled public. Humiliation complete, her powdered face crumpled, allies fleeing to avoid the taint. Victory thundered. Eleanor's heart soared in euphoria's peak, the room's roar validating every tear, every flight. Arthur's eyes met hers, shining with pride. His hand finding hers in the crush, a squeeze tacit and profound. If you're captivated by this triumph, hit that like button now. Your support fuels more tales like this. The discourse dissolved into supper, but the couple slipped away to a quiet alcove, Theo dozing against Eleanor's shoulder. Silence wrapped them, post-storm calm, broken only by distant laughter. Arthur traced her ring with a thumb, gaze intense. "You saved us," he whispered. "No grand vows, just this intimate pact, love's quiet seal amid the glittering chaos." Yet as they turned toward the exit, a footman approached, envelope in hand. "From London, my lord, urgent, creditors stirred by tonight's whispers." The fragile piece trembled, new shadows stirring beyond the assembly's glow. Word count 872. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel as they left Gloucester behind, the assembly's clamour fading into the Cotswolds' hushed night. Eleanor leaned against the squabs, Theo's soft breaths a steady rhythm against her chest. Arthur broke the envelope's seal by lantern light, his face tightening in the flickering glow. "Creditors from London," he murmured, scanning the lines. Stirred by Edmund's lies. "They demand settlement, double the interest or seizure of the northern fields." The words hung heavy, but his hand found hers, fingers interlacing with quiet resolve. No panic now, just partnership, forged in the assembly's fire. Back at Blackwood Manor, dawn painted the stone facade gold, chasing shadows from the towers. Servants bustled with renewed vigour, stewards who'd wavered now bowed deeper, their eyes bright with loyalty reborn. The journal's revelations had rippled outward, tenants gathering at the gates with caps in hand, murmuring thanks for the truth unveiled. Eleanor dismounted, Theo in her arms, and felt the shift, no longer intruder but lady of the house. Her voice, once a whisper in Willowbrook's Inn, now carried weight, compassion in her nods to the families, leadership in her quiet questions about their hardships. Arthur led her to the library, where the council reconvened, not as tribunal, but allies. Solicitors pored over the true ledgers, cross-referencing the forgeries. "Edmund's hand plain as day," one declared, pointing to mismatched inks. The dowager's absence loomed. Rumours placed her fled to her sisters in Bath, her letters returned unopened. Consequentias concrete fell swift. Constables had seized Edmund at a coaching inn near Cirencester, his pockets stuffed with creditor notes he'd pocketed himself. Forgery charges bound him for trial in Gloucester Assizes, his title ambitions shattered like cheap glass. Exiled from Blackwood in chains, he spat curses as they led him away, his pale face twisted in defeat. The dowager followed suit. Disinherited by Arthur's decree, her dower reduced to a modest cottage in Kent, far from society's gaze. Her prestige crumbled, invitations dried up, whispers branding her the schemer who'd nearly toppled a house. Legal threads knotted tight. Arthur signed the marriage ratification before a county magistrate that afternoon, the special license validated with witnesses from the assembly. No more shadows, Eleanor's name etched official in the family Bible, Theo legitimized with a christening planned for the village chapel. Debts, once a noose, eased under scrutiny, honest tenants' rents restructured, war loans renegotiated with the Journal as leverage. London bankers, chastened by the scandal's exposure, offered terms fairer than before. Blackwood breathed again, its burdens lightened by truth's blade. In the rose garden that evening, where their love had first bloomed under moonlight, Arthur drew Eleanor aside. Theo played on a blanket nearby, tugging at daisies with chubby fists, watched by Mrs. Grady, who'd arrived as nursemaid with a wagon of Willowbrook warmth. The air smelled of damp earth and fading blooms, the sun dipping low in a sky-streaked pink. Arthur knelt, not in proposal's formality, but equality's grace. From his pocket came a new ring, simple platinum, unadorned, crafted fresh by the village silversmith. No heirlooms tainted by the dowager's venom. "This," he said, voice steady, "is ours alone. No chains, no debts, just you, me, and the life we build." Eleanor's heart swelled as she extended her hand, the band sliding warm over her knuckle. "By choice," she whispered, her green eyes locking with his. Transformation shone in them both, his voice softer now, laced with humility, hers bolder, compassion guiding every word. They rose together, his arm around her waist, and shared a kiss, not stolen in shadows, but open under the open sky. Gentle, profound, sealing their alliance as equals. Theo cooed, reaching up, and Arthur lifted him, the 3A unit unbroken. Legacy took root swiftly. Eleanor, drawing from her seamstress days, proposed a village school in the manor's unused wing, lessons for tenants' children, funded by estate surpluses. Arthur championed it, his leadership evolving from duty's weight to inspired vision. Bookshelves filled with volumes on agriculture and letters, a nod to her mother's tales. Mrs. Grady beamed, recompensed with a cottage of her own. Old Tom, the gamekeeper, rose to head warden, his loyalty rewarded with a pension. Neutral coadjuvantes repositioned. The Assembly's baronet pledged alliance, merchants funneled trade to Blackwood's fairs. Even the parson's wife from the posting horn sent linens as a peace offering. Her earlier sniffs turned to invitations. Supper that night unfolded in the great hall, tables groaning under roast pheasant and autumn pies. Tenants joined, a feast blending high and low, no rigid hierarchies. Just shared toasts to renewal. Eleanor spoke first, her voice clear over the clink of silver. "We've weathered storms," she said, hand in Arthur's. "Now we sow fields of tomorrow." Cheers rose, the hall alive with hope. Arthur watched her, pride etching his smile. Their bond a quiet force amid the joy. As stars pricked the velvet sky, they walked the battlements, Theo asleep in the nursery. The horizon stretched endless, hills rolling to distant moors, Blackwood's lights a beacon. Arthur paused, drawing her close. "This is our equilibrium," he murmured, lips brushing her temple. "Freedom, not flight. Love, not chains." Yet in the study's candlelight later, a letter arrived by express rider, sealed with a London crest from a distant cousin inquiring after alliances. "The family's web lingers," Arthur noted, folding it away. "A soft hook for futures untold, but tonight peace reigned supreme." 5 years had woven their gentle spell over Blackwood Manor, transforming the once shadowed halls into a haven of light and laughter. The Cotswolds hills rolled greener now, kissed by rains that fed bountiful harvests. The estate's debts long since tamed into thriving ledgers. Eleanor stood at the nursery window, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, her third child, due with the spring. At 27, she carried herself with the quiet grace of a woman who'd claimed her world, her dark curls pinned loosely under a lace cap, her gown of soft cambric flowing over curves softened by motherhood. Below, in the rose garden, where vows had been renewed under open skies, Arthur chased their daughter, little Beatrice, named not for the dowager, but for a village wildflower that bloomed defiant, through the hedges. At 5, she squealed with delight, her pinafore muddied golden curls bouncing like sunlight on water. Theo, 7 and solemn-eyed like his father, followed at a more measured pace, a wooden sword at his side, practicing the knightly poses Arthur had taught him. "Papa, wait!" Beatrice called, her voice piping clear. Arthur scooped her up, spinning her until giggles echoed off the stone walls, his laughter deep and unburdened. 35 now. The lines around his grey eyes spoke of joys earned, not burdens borne. His coat, simple broadcloth without the old ostentation, hung open as he set her down, ruffling Theo's hair with a father's easy affection. Eleanor smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest that chased away the chill of memory. Their love had not just resisted time, it had deepened, roots twisting through trials into something unbreakable. Mornings began with shared glances over breakfast, his hand finding hers under the table. Evenings ended in the library, where she'd read aloud from volumes on estate reform. Theo curled at her feet. No more shadows of doubt. Arthur's duty had evolved into passion, his voice in tenant meetings carrying her compassion, fair rents, shared profits from the new wool mill she'd championed. The village school thrived, its stone walls echoing with lessons for 50 children, many the sons and daughters of those who'd once whispered scandal, yet nostalgia tugged, soft as the autumn leaves drifting past the panes. Eleanor remembered the storm-lashed lodge, the assembly's roar, Edmund's fall. He had paid dearly, transported to the colonies after the assizes, his schemes exposed in every broadsheet from London to Bath. Whispers said he toiled on a Virginia plantation. Title dreams dust. The dowager lingered in Kent's isolation, her letters rare and bitter, her prestige a faded echo. She'd lost everything. Allies scattered, her sister's door barred after one too many venomous tales. Price paid in solitude, her venom turned inward, aging her beyond her years. Mrs. Grady bustled in then, her apron dusted with flour from the kitchens, cheeks rounder with contentment. "Tea's ready, ma'am, and the wee one's kicking fierce today. Must be a lad like his brother." The innkeeper turned nursemaid had become family, her Willowbrook wisdom a steady thread. She'd married old Tom the gamekeeper 2 summers past, their cottage by the river a hub for estate gatherings, allies rewarded. Tom's pension grew with the years, his roomy eyes now bright with grandchildren. Arthur glanced up, catching Eleanor's gaze through the glass. He waved, then gathered the children, leading them inside with promises of stories by the fire. The manor hummed with life. Servants who once bowed in fear now smiled openly. The great hall hosting weekly suppers where tenants shared tables, no divide of class. Social changes rippled outward. The county assembly, once a den of barbs, now praised Blackwood's model. Fair labour drawing families from Yorkshire's harsh moors. The wool trade booming under Eleanor's eye for quality threads. That evening, as twilight painted the hills violet, the family gathered in the drawing room, Theo perched on Arthur's knee, absorbing tales of his grandfather's hunts, truths untainted by the old lies. Beatrice twirled a doll, her laughter a melody. Eleanor sat close, Arthur's arm around her shoulders, his thumb tracing lazy circles on her sleeve. 5 years, he murmured later, when the children slept, the two of them walking the battlements under a canopy of stars. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and heather, crisp and alive. "And a lifetime ahead," she replied, leaning into him. The horizon stretched boundless, Blackwood's lights a warm constellation below. No more flights into mist, no gilded traps. Just this, love's quiet triumph, a legacy of resilience blooming in every face, every harvest. Theo would inherit not just lands, but a heart unbound. Beatrice, a world where voice mattered more than blood. Their family, whole and fierce, stood as testament, storms past, roots held, joy eternal. As a nightingale's song pierced the dark, Eleanor rested her head on Arthur's shoulder. Peace, hard won, wrapped them like a shawl. The future called bright as dawn over the Cotswolds, and they answered together. As the stars wheeled overhead on that serene Cotswolds night, Eleanor and Arthur lingered on the battlements, the manor's warm glow a testament to the life they had forged from the ashes of doubt and deceit. Their story, born in the misty hills of Willowbrook and tempered in the fires of Blackwood's trials, whispered a timeless truth, that love, when rooted in courage and truth, could bridge the widest chasms of class and convention. Eleanor had run not just for freedom, but to claim her voice, a seamstress's hands weaving a destiny no title could dictate. Arthur, once bound by duty's heavy chains, learned that true nobility lay in vulnerability, in choosing heart over heritage. In the end, their union triumphed, not through grand decrees or inherited wealth, but through quiet acts of defiance. Eleanor's unyielding stand in the assembly rooms, Arthur's hand extended in the storm-lashed lodge, the shared laughter of their children echoing where once only whispers of scandal had dwelled. Lessons etched in every petal of the rose garden. Resilience blooms in adversity, trust rebuilds what fear tears down, and family is not blood alone, but the bonds we choose to honor. They proved that even in an era of rigid hierarchies, one woman's flight could spark a revolution of the soul, turning a Marquess's plea into a partnership eternal. And so, dear listener, as the curtain falls on Eleanor and Arthur's journey, reflect on your own paths. What chains might you break? What truths demand your voice? If this tale of passion, peril, and redemption stirred your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment made you cheer for their victory or ache with their struggles? To show you've journeyed to this heartfelt close, type the word resilience in the comments. It will light up my day and help spread these stories to more souls seeking inspiration. For more tales of Regency romance, where hidden secrets unravel into enduring love, check the cards above. Adventures await in misty moors and blooming gardens. Thank you for joining me around this fireside of words. Until next time, may your own horizons shine as brightly as Blackwood's dawn.